I've had so many requests for this video, you guys. You have no idea how excited I am to actually film this today. Look, I know you've probably already watched like 6 how to grow your glutes videos already, because I was the exact same. But the thing is, the girls in these videos already started with at least some amount of glute, and then they took like 5 years to get to their transformation. When I say I started from literally 0, I'm not even kidding. We're talking not pancake level, we're talking like crepe level. I made my transformation in just over 2 years. So even though my glutes currently are not the biggest glutes in the world, the advice and the exercises I'm about to share with you have worked for me, but have also been widely researched and helped over 90% of women grow their glutes. There's a high chance it's gonna work for you, but you need to remember that what works for one person might not work for someone else because we're all built different. But one thing I need you to remember before we jump in is that even if you don't have big glutes, even if you have abs or you don't have abs, you are still beautiful and your physical appearance doesn't determine your worth. So remember that. But if you do want to grow your glutes, there's also nothing wrong with that. And aesthetics aside, building strong glutes is actually really important for stability, athletic performance, as well as your posture. So I'm going to take you through the 3 steps that help me finally grow my glutes. And at the end of the video, I'm also going to show you one of my favorite glute workouts that I saw the most results with, and walk you through the form of each of the exercises so that you know how to do them properly, so that you're actually targeting your glutes and not other muscle groups instead. But it's very important that you stay through the whole video and watch all 3 of the steps, because if you even miss like one part of one of them out, then you're not going to see the best results and your glutes just aren't going to grow. This is quite a common misconception, but we can't actually train certain areas to spot reduce weight. However, we can be smart with the exercises that we choose to build muscle in order to grow certain areas like our glutes. But there's actually no point in looking at the certain exercises we can use to grow and shape our glutes if our nutrition's not on point. Because honestly, nutrition is going to make up at least 70% of the results that you actually see. So that's why we're starting with step 1, nutrition. One of the biggest mistakes that I see so often with people who want to try and grow their glutes is that they're just not eating enough. You need to be in at least a small calorie surplus to be able to build new muscle tissue. That essentially means that you're eating slightly more calories than you burn throughout the day so that your body has enough fuel to build the new muscle tissue. I've got a whole playlist of videos that I'll link above to help you find out what that specific number should be for you, because it's gonna be different to everyone, and what one person needs to eat to build muscle is gonna be different from someone else. But your total calorie intake is gonna be made up of 3 different components called your macronutrients. So these are your carbs, your fats, and your protein. To put it super simply, protein helps your body build muscle. Carbs give your body energy, so allow you to push hard in the gym, which then creates the stimulus for you to build muscle. And fats are just essential for your general health. So like your heart health, your joint health, hormones, it's just really important. The research recommends that you get at least 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight each day. And in terms of the specific time that you need to eat this protein, what makes the biggest impact is the total daily amount of protein. If you can space this out equally in between 3 to 5 meals, then that is ideal. But if not, then you really don't have to stress about it. Another thing you might hear people talking about quite a lot when it comes to protein is this thing called the anabolic window. So it's basically the idea that you have to get protein in at least like a minimum of 30 minutes straight after your workout. This has not been completely proven by the science. Yes, the closer that you have your protein to the time where you finish your workout is going to be beneficial. But if you have to wait an hour till you get home to have your protein, then that's also okay. You're not going to lose a massive amount of your gains or anything as long as you get your total daily amount of protein in. That being said, if it is something that you're concerned about, then just grab a protein shake, shove it in your gym bag, and it's there and ready for you. Whoever originally said that carbs were bad obviously didn't know how important they were if you're someone who's wanting to build muscle. So unless you've specifically been told by your healthcare provider to cut out carbs, please don't cut them out, because you're literally leaving gains on the table. Unless you're specifically on a keto diet and you're in ketosis, then carbs are your body's main energy source. So you're gonna need quite a lot of them to actually give you the energy you need to push hard in your workouts. So if I was to sum up the best approach to nutrition in order to grow your glutes in just one sentence, it would be eating a calorie surplus, prioritizing protein with all macros included. And stay consistent, but you already knew that. The next question that I'm always asked when it comes to this topic is, what are the best exercises for glute growth? One thing that will really help you understand why these exercises are the best to grow your glutes is actually having a bit more of an understanding about glute anatomy itself. So your glutes are made up of three main muscles: your gluteus maximus, which is obviously the biggest one, your gluteus medius, which is sort of at the side in the top part of your glute, and then your gluteus minimus, which sort of sits between the gluteus maximus and the gluteus minimus, so it's sort of in the middle. And in order to get the most overall glute growth, we want to focus mainly, like most of our efforts, on the gluteus maximus. The main function of the gluteus maximus is hip extension, so that's any movements where you're driving your hips forwards. The best example to visualize this is, think about when you're doing an RDL or Romanian deadlift. As you bring the bar up, you're naturally moving your hips forwards, so that is hip extension. A lot of the glute exercises that you see online either don't train hip extension at all and they just focus on the smaller glute muscles, or they do train hip extension but they just don't train it in a way that allows you to load it heavy or progress over time. There's really four main types of exercises that allow us to train the gluteus maximus most optimally using hip extension. So these are pressing movements like squats or leg press, lunge movements, so things like Bulgarian split squats, or basically any kind of lunge you can think of. Hinge movements, which includes RDLs, deadlifts, and good mornings. And thrust movements, so things like hip thrusts and glute bridges. These exercises honestly aren't super fancy, but you need to make sure that you're using the right form with them, because if you're not using the correct form, then you're gonna end up targeting different muscle groups when you're doing the same exercise. It's the tiniest tweaks that can make the world of difference when it comes down to how well you actually target your glutes. So I'll go over all of that in the workout at the end of the video. The next part of the glutes that you will often hear people talking about is the lower glutes. And this is quite controversial actually, because there's not really a lower glute muscle per se. In bodybuilding, we sometimes refer to this area as the glute hamstring tie-in, because it's the area where your glute meets your hamstrings. And unlike the gluteus maximus or medius or minimus or all of those, the lower glutes isn't a separate muscle of its own. So there aren't really any secret exercises you can use to target it. That being said, the lower glutes are part of your gluteus maximus. So the exercises I usually like to choose to shift the emphasis towards the lower portion of the glutes are ones that tend to involve a bit of a bigger stretch. I especially like hinge movements for this, so things like RDLs and good mornings, because they also work your hamstrings to some extent. And that's closer to the area that we want to target when you think about the lower glutes as the glute ham tie-in. Now possibly the most popular part of the glutes, if there is a most popular part of the glutes, but it's the upper glutes, or the shelf. When people talk about the upper glutes, they're mainly referring to the gluteus medius plus a little bit of the gluteus maximus. And the best way we can use to build that shelf is using exercises that involve hip abduction. So this is any exercise where your leg is moving away from your body. It's also worth noting that changing your foot position or your stance with some of the more common like compound exercises can help you target your gluteus medius more. So for example, if you're doing hip thrusts, you can put a band around your knees so your knees are pushing out against the band. That way, when you go to do your hip thrust, you're going to be targeting the gluteus medius a bit more since your knees are pushing outwards. I honestly only have two go-to exercises to target the upper glutes, and that would be cable kickbacks and hip abductions. If you have the machine available, I would always go with the machine because you're going to be able to progress more with that because you can add more weight and resistance onto it. But if you don't have the choice, then resistance bands are still a good option because you can get thicker ones to give you a bit more of that resistance. I actually didn't have a hip abduction machine either until just recently when I moved gyms. So what I did was I still used the cable machine, but just the way I set up my cable kickbacks was different. So I was kicking out to the side rather than sort of at 45 degrees. And that allowed me to target the gluteus medius just that tiny bit more. But honestly, even if you left hip abductions out completely, you would still see good overall glute growth if you were doing the compound exercises like hip thrust, lunges, RDLs, deadlifts, squats, all that stuff. Because the gluteus maximus is the biggest muscle in your glutes. It's the biggest muscle in your whole body. So that's going to be what makes the biggest difference in the size of your glutes. There's a few quick little points I just want to touch on that not many people talk about to do with glute exercises. The first one is being activation exercises. This was a massive trend not that long ago. Don't get me wrong, It works really well if you use it as a warm-up. So basically just incorporating resistance bands into your warm-up for like 5 minutes max. But some people were taking it way too far. Essentially, they were doing like a whole workout of activating your glutes and then did their actual lifting workout. I personally think that that takes out some of the effort you could put into your real workout that you were meant to be doing in the first place. So yes, use resistance bands and activation exercises as part of your warm-up. But honestly, you don't need to do more than 10 minutes of this because you'll just be taking out of the effort that you could be putting into actually lifting heavy. That being said, they can be very good as like a burnout at the end of your workout. But studies have also shown that that burn sensation isn't directly correlated to the amount of growth you'll see. So you shouldn't rely on it as your indicator of how much growth you're going to get from that workout. I hope that makes sense, but essentially when it comes to activation exercises, just do what feels best for you. If it helps you be able to get that mind-muscle connection with your glutes before you go into your full workout, go for it. Personally, the only way I really use activation exercises is for things like hip thrusts. So for my first set, like as my warm-up set, I'll use a really light weight. I'll get my resistance band, put it around my knees, and just do like 10 to 12 reps of that. Super easy, super straightforward, but it helps me focus on engaging my glutes before going into my actual heavy sets. That brings me on to the next question that people will often ask me is how heavy should you go and for how many reps? So the technical way that we refer to building muscle is called hypertrophy. And generally what you'll hear referred to as the specific hypertrophy range is anywhere from like 6 to 12 reps. But in reality, you can actually build muscle below that range or above that range. So I like to extend this from anywhere from 5 to 20 reps. That is personally the range of reps that I would use in my workouts. Not for every exercise, but that is typically the minimum and the maximum amount of reps I would do in one single set. Anywhere below 5 reps is usually dipping more into the strength range, so you might not see as much muscle growth with that lower rep number, but you could see a much bigger increase in your strength. Typically, I found the sweet spot in terms of growth to be anywhere from 8 to 12 reps. When it comes to how heavy you should be lifting, this is the answer I will always give people, and it's lift as heavy as you can with proper form. If your form starts to deteriorate, then you're going to shift the emphasis off the muscle that you're trying to work onto other stabilizing muscles, and you don't want to do that. You want to focus the most effort that you're putting in on the actual muscle you want to grow. Lifting this way will also help you to prevent injury as well, which is super important. But the most important thing when it comes to your exercises is choosing ones that you can progressively overload with, and actually using progressive overload. So most commonly that means increasing the weight, increasing the number of reps or number of sets you can lift over time. I'm pretty sure I talked about this in another video, I can't remember which one it was, so I'll quickly recap. But the way I like to do progressive overload is if I have a rep range, so say 10 to 12 reps, I will aim for the top number of that rep range before I increase the weight. So you want to increase the reps first, then when you've hit the top of your rep range, increase the weight. And make sure you're continuously trying to do that every single week, and your muscles have to grow. The third step is arguably most important. I know I said nutrition was most important, but I'm starting to change my mind, because if you don't have your rest and recovery on point, then you're not going to see any growth. A lot of people think that your muscles grow in the gym, but that's not true. It's actually the rest and recovery time where your muscles are growing. So making sure that you're taking rest days, making sure that you're getting enough sleep and actually giving your body time to recover is gonna go so much further than you think. When I started working out, I didn't give myself enough rest days. I think I only had one rest day a week for the longest time, and I didn't see that much growth. Like, it was very slow progress. But as soon as I started training 5 days instead of 6 or 7 days, my progress, it just sort of blew up out of nowhere. So you need to start taking your rest days seriously. I know it's very counterintuitive that doing less will get you more results, but I say if it works, honestly, take it, because if you're not, then you're missing out. Obviously, the ideal number of training days will be different for every single person because our bodies respond to our training completely differently. So you might need more time to recover from your workouts than the next person to get the same results as them. On average though, from the research, it's generally agreed that the most optimal training frequency for any muscle group is 3 times per week, but you want to give yourself at least 1 day in between each of those sessions to allow your body to recover. So for example, to make sure you are getting adequate amounts of rest, doing a 5-day split like me with the main goal of growing your glutes, you could do Monday rest day, Tuesday lower body day, Wednesday upper body day, and that will give you a rest from your lower body. Then you could do Thursday lower body day, Friday rest day, Saturday lower body day, Sunday upper body day. This gives you enough rest between all of your sessions to allow your muscles to recover, and that means that when you break them down next time you're training in the gym, you're going to be able to grow from that. So making sure you've got your nutrition, your training, and your rest and recovery locked in is going to get you the best results in terms of glute. I keep saying glute instead of glute. I've said that I don't know, 10 times at least in this video so far. Glute growth. You also want to make sure that you're structuring each of your glute workouts in a way that's going to allow you to get the most out of them. Before we start any workout, it's super important that you warm up. I usually do this by doing 5 minutes or so of light cardio on the elliptical, and then I do some dynamic stretches. This will help get the blood flowing, reduce our risk of injury, and just get us ready to lift. The way I structure my glute workouts is by starting with the compound exercises, so these are ones that use multiple muscle groups. We want to start with the compound lifts because that's when you're going to have the most energy. And think about it, if you left them to the end, then you're not going to have as much energy, so it's not going to be as safe because your body's going to be fatigued from all of the previous exercises. So we're starting off with a warm-up set of hip thrusts. I usually do about 10 to 12 reps with the band and just a really light weight. After that, we can add some more weight onto the bar and move on to our working sets. When setting up for hip thrusts, you want the box of the bench to be just under your shoulder blades. Your feet should be about shoulder width apart with your toes slightly pointed outwards. You can't really see it here because of the plate, but my knees are also forming a 90-degree angle with the ground. When you thrust the weight upwards, you don't want to overextend at the top. You just want to bring it to the point where your spine's sort of in a neutral position, and I've heard people explain it like you want to think about squeezing a penny in between your glutes, and that'll be a really helpful cue to help you get that mind-muscle connection into play. So we're going to do 3 sets here. The first one I ended each rep with a pulse, but the final 2 sets are just going to be regular sets. Next we're doing 2 sets of barbell static lunges. You can do this with dumbbells, but I personally prefer the bar because it means that I don't need to rely on grip strength. And that means I can lift heavier. In most of my glute workouts, I try to include one of each of the 4 types of exercises that we talked about earlier in the video. So we've already had the thrust movement and now we're on to the lunge movement. And the one key thing that helps me with the form when it comes to lunges is thinking about the front foot as a tripod. I know it sounds weird, but hear me out. Your big toe, your little toe, and your heel are like the 3 legs of the tripod, and you want to push through the ground using all 3 of it. So you're using your whole foot, not just the front or not just the heel. We're always going to move slow and controlled on the way down, and you want to go down to the point where your back knee is just above the floor. You can touch the floor, but try not to bounce off it. You also want to brace your core as if someone's about to punch you in the stomach throughout the whole movement, because this is what's going to keep you stable. Next we're doing 3 sets of dumbbell RDLs. I like to use wrist straps for these, or lifting chalk if I don't have my wrist straps. But if you have neither, then that's no problem. It just helps you a bit with your grip strength. Stand with your feet shoulder width apart and initiate the movement by pushing your hips backwards. So really you're leading the movement with your hips and not just moving your knees to go downwards, because then it sort of turns into more of a squat, and it can also shift some more of the emphasis onto your lower back instead of your glutes and hamstrings. Now we're moving on to some of our more isolation exercises, and our main aim here is to target more of the gluteus medius. First we're going to do 2 sets of cable kickbacks, and there's honestly so many different variations that you could do, but the main things that I like to include in the way I do them is use a plate on the floor so that I'm not hitting my back leg off the ground every time I move it, and really initiate the movement from your hip as you're kicking backwards. I also try to keep my upper body pretty still so that all of the movement, or at least the majority of the movement, is coming from the lower body. So you're holding onto the machine and kicking out at a 45-degree angle. Most gyms will have entire foot straps rather than ankle straps like I'm using here, but I'll link to some in the description that I would really recommend getting, because it honestly makes so much of a difference in how much I feel my glutes during the exercise. Now for a little bit more glute medius, we're doing hip abductions. This machine is quite self-explanatory, to be honest, but the only things I would note is you want to push through your whole feet, and you can either set up this exercise in two ways. The way I'm sitting just now with my back against the backrest is the typical way that you will usually see, and this will target your gluteus medius, but you can also lean forwards a bit and that'll create a bigger stretch on your glutes. So it's going to target more of the muscles in your glutes, which is what I personally prefer, but it really all comes down to personal preference. Okay girlie, so now you're fully equipped with everything you need to know to go and grow your glutes. This is actually the first video in our brand new muscle growth series, so make sure you're subscribed, because if you're not, then you are going to miss out. Comment below which muscle group you want to see next, and also any glute growth tips that you have, because it's definitely going to help us girlies in the comments. I also just love chatting to you guys, and I respond to all my comments, go check. But I appreciate you so much, and I'm so excited for this new series. You have no idea. So I'll see you in the next one.